Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. Okay. So my story this week, I don't really feel like I even have a story except for you can head to Patreon. I talk more about this, but my family was in town for my nephew's game, which was very sad. TCU lost their game, and I was beside myself, but my nephew was totally happy with his performance, and they'll be good next year. But my mom was here for a lot of the time, and by the end, it's like no matter what age I am in my family pecking order, I always revert back to like the young child that I was with my mom. And by the end, we were in these like giant fights, mostly about politics, like just dumb stuff. And by the end, I was like, okay, bye, mom. Dropped her off at the airport, like kissed her goodbye. I adore my mom, but we can only be together in doses sometimes because we bicker and we differ politically, like to the point where it's very difficult sometimes because you have to be so careful the conversations that you bring up. So that's my number one point. Not that funny. Funny if you actually experienced 5 minutes of a conversation with us, then that would be funny, but I can't really take you on that ride. Listen to the episode my mom and I did together. I'll say that. That was out like probably 6 months ago, and it's pretty funny. What I will also bring up before I introduce my beautiful guest is I did a post on Instagram, and it was a very, like, if you've listened to me for a long time, you know I can be a crier. And I posted this post in the past week, and it's basically about how I have this podcast. It's thankfully successful and you all listen. So grateful to you. But I also just signed with a speaking agency. So I'm going to be doing motivational speaking across the country. And I'm also writing my book. And then I have a chapter in a book coming out on February 28th. So more to come on that in the next month. But the reason I kind of made this post is because I'm very open with my journey about my own struggles with my mental health and how it got so bad at one point in like 2019, 2020 that I did not want to be here. And thankfully, with the help of my therapist, and I went to a psychiatrist, I got put on an anti-anxiety medicine. So my panic attacks kind of got into check. I'm not on medication now. But I really share these stories every week with my guests, share my own story, get vulnerable, is because I want people to understand that sharing your story and sharing what you've gone through is so important because it really can help just one person. So when I did that post, my intention was not to like brag and be like, and then I did this and now I'm doing this. It's really because I did not want to be here in 2019 and I truly almost checked out. And I try not to think back on that time, but it's a reminder that we're all here and we all have a story and we all never know what our future is going to bring. So in 2019, if you would have told me, I didn't even know what a podcast was. I grew up with attention deficit disorder. I never would have thought I would be able to write a book or have a chapter in a book. Yes, I've always been an actress and I love entertaining and making people laugh, but motivational speaking, the point of all of this like long-winded story is like your story matters, and you never know 5 years from now, 1 year from now, where you are going to be. So it's so important to remind yourself of that. And we need you, and the world needs you, and there's only one of you. So we need you to stay. We've all been put here for a reason, and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Meghan.
On that note, I am going to introduce my beautiful guest, Hannah Sward. I said it correctly, right?
You did, yeah. Hi, everyone.
Okay, I always get nervous. I'm like, wait, am I saying the name right? Hannah is the author of Strip, and I actually found her. She followed me on Instagram, like when I posted that post, I think pretty recently.
Yeah.
And I don't always open like when people follow me, or I don't, but I've said this over and over again on the podcast. I'm always drawn to things and people for different reasons. And I really believe everything happens for a reason, and you're supposed to find people for different reasons. And the minute I opened her profile, I was like, okay, she has to come on. Messaged her, and here we are, right? Here we are. So welcome.
Thank you, Meghan. It's such an honor to be here. And I think it was that post, your vulnerability. I was like, oh, I was all in. And what you were sharing about, you just never know what's going to happen. And you sharing that in 2019, that's where you were and where you are now. I mean, we need those things so, like, that spoke to me because especially in this day and age where we see all this stuff on here and we don't really know. Like, I could look at you and I'm like, oh my God, those blue, like all blue eyes, like that's this big podcast. And then you share that and I'm like, oh, like that speaks to me.
Wow. Thank you for saying that. But that's like the whole point of social media and all of this stuff, which has like really corrupted our society, yet I still use it and I'm on it like every day, is really like my personal Instagram has my kids, you know, and like my life, where I call it my Instagram life. Like, we're at Disneyland, we're so happy. Meanwhile, we had a giant fight this morning and I wanted to beat you up and hit you over the head with a pan, but I didn't do it. And then the Judging Meghan Instagram is really, I started it because of the podcast, but it's really like, yes, you're going to see ugly crying. Yes, you're going to like know true things about my struggles. And I think that that's how social media can be a good thing, because it normalizes mental health, and it normalizes that we all, at some point in our life, as perfect as somebody's life looks from the outside, are all going to struggle, whether it be with loss, grief, the things that addiction, the things that you've gone through in your life, or I have. You never know. So that's why talking about it is the best thing that you can do for yourself and other people. So let's get into your story. I want to find out, I mean, you have this very successful book out. I want to find out where you're from. I know you're from living on the West Coast, because a lot of my guests are not, and so it's always hard to schedule. Tell me about your childhood and your upbringing. Let's start there.
Well, first, I'm already teared up, so hopefully I will keep it together during this. I don't know.
Oh, get ready for it. You're at the right place. I cry every episode. Just get ready. Yeah. Not every episode, but most of them. Go ahead.
You've seen my eyes already water up. I'm like, oh God, here we go. My childhood. You know, it's always interesting when like asked about that, because like, you know, sometimes it can be kind of sound like take through, you know, someone through, and it sounds like this and this and this, and this kind of gets like a little tedious. However, just a real snapshot. You know, I grew up in Victoria in the first 9 years, bohemian parents, artist parents, poet father, and it was in the 70s, so it was the hippie time, or at least my parents were hippies. And my mother fell in love with a sculptor when I was 2, and she left. So I grew up with my father, which at that time, especially, fathers didn't normally get custody of their children. In any case, that. And I, you know, we moved around a lot. We moved to Toronto Island at one, you know, when I was 9. And we lived on an island with no cars or stores, and we were in this little like cottage house. And it had like a not a furnace, wood stove that if you like swung, uh, there was a swing in the living room and it would swing right into the wood stove. And it was just like, I'm not sure why I'm sharing that image, but that image, like I was thinking of that this morning. I'm like, interesting, like, and like when we moved in, there was
It sounds like kind of like what I would picture like Laurel
yeah,
Canyon in the
yes,
70s being like. Am I
no,
off? Like,
totally,
like how they had all those like communes
yeah,
and like all the singers would be up there, like the
yeah,
mamas and the papas.
yeah.
Is that a good accurate description?
Yeah, that's very much it. And yeah, and actually my father was very much into the gurus and meditation, and even as a kid I had a meditation pillow, and he was following Baba Muktananda at the time, and he went to India, and I just remember coming, I had this meditation pillow, and we ended up moving to a commune at one point up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And just remember as a child too, like the microphone going around in this big meditation hall, big ashram, and people are asking like, what is it to be in the here and the now, and and then the guru just nodded and was like, oh, and just anyway. So my childhood was a little unorthodox, and there was also
Yeah.
a lot of trauma. I I spent a lot of time alone as a child, and when I was 6, I was kidnapped from a park,
Oh
by a
my gosh.
stranger, and
Mm-hmm.
he said that if I ever told anyone what he did or what I was going to do, that he would kill me. And obviously, I'm here to share about it. However, what
Mm-hmm.
happened with that experience is I got in trouble for it. That was and I really internalized that as stuffing down my voice. Like, that was really the point where, like, I think I really, uh, as much as a child can, like, I abandoned my own self at that age. Right. So it was
Yeah.
like just this feeling like I didn't have a right to exist. And I say that because,
It's interesting that you say that because I've interviewed multiple children, and what you're saying in the very beginning of your story is age 2, like trauma already started, right? Your mom left.
yeah,
And then this is all under the age of 6 years old, but also back in that time, from so many of the stories I've heard, parents didn't know what to say to their kids when they were in these situations.
yeah,
Um, and so they would lash out a lot of times at their kids. This
yeah.
is a common thing, a common theme that I've actually heard. Like, don't talk about it, push it down. And like maybe I'm trying to think. I did an episode pretty recently where we talked about this, and the same kind of thing happened. And what that does to a child, you know what? It's a episode that's going to air this week. Same exact thing. A girl that I just had on, Elaine, she had an incident like that, and it just stayed with her for her whole life until she started getting help. Yeah, it makes sense though. And I'm sorry to talk over you, but I had to say that.
No, I actually didn't. No, I'm very interested in hearing about that. And uh, yeah, it was a different time. It was a different time. I mean,
Mhm.
in a different way. I mean, there was an Amber Alert. There just wasn't the awareness that there is now. And I think you're right. Like that, parents
Mhm.
just, I don't know what that was. I do remember going to the hospital or to the doctors for quite a while after, because I would have these nightmares that I was having a baby. I was, I would get in that position and act out well, not act out and live these nightmares. And I just remember as a child, like would take me out of school. I'd go to the doctors and be put to sleep, and then they put glue in my hair, or at least I'm sure it wasn't glue, but that's what my memory of it is, and wires to test the sleeping patterns or something. And the nightmares went away. I don't know why I'm sharing that right now.
No, that's, you know what that is. That's a massive amount of PTSD because our brains don't have the capability to process trauma when we're that little.
Right.
So, like in my case, I witnessed my little sister die at age 2. So I had a reoccurring dream every year until I was like about 11 and 12, and that's when I started therapy. And I had a dream that I picked her up and I drowned her. Like I flushed her down the toilet. This is very common. This is because you have complex PTSD, yet it's so much worse in a child because there's no way to know how to handle it.
Yeah.
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 I'm so sorry to hear that.
And likewise. I mean, I can't even imagine that. And it lends itself then to, when I had a babysitter when I was 9, I didn't like him. And I mean, that's an understatement. However, again, using my voice and saying I wasn't heard. Right. And I also had a little brother who was 7 years younger than myself. So he was 2 at that time with the babysitter. And I was really scared for him as well. Yeah. So it was a chaotic childhood. It was also filled with, a lot of art and creativity and literature. And my father, worked at the university, as I was a professor at university for a while, and poet. So it was the sensibility of and the love for art, poetry. My earliest memories are going to poetry readings with him, and along with the meditation and the gurus.
I mean, that seems like the happy stuff is like your brain tries to extract these like happy thoughts, but and like erase the negative ones. I find that I do that too, I mean, just as a protective mechanism, because it's not all bad, obviously.
Yeah.
And but it is like your childhood trauma stays with you further. It's like an extra appendage that you can't see for the rest of your life, and it's like constantly working on it, and it's a constant struggle to have to work on these kinds of things. Tell me, so that seems like kind of like how your struggles probably were taken into your adulthood, and where you kind of landed. Were you always in Canada, or you kind of said you came to the States and you were in California? Am I wrong on that?
No, we did. Yeah. So my mother ended up moving to Florida. So every summer I would see her every July for a month. And she had my half sister lived with her and my stepfather and so I just to plant the seed that my sister and I were really close. She was 3 years younger. Even though we only saw each other once a year, we were just glued to each other. And nobody else existed when, like all her friends knew scatter. When the sister comes, leave, because, we'll be, And so I would spend a month every year in Florida. And then when I was in ninth grade, we moved to Mount Madonna, a commune up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So we moved to the States at that time, and went to a little private school up there. Well, little, when I say little, it was 11 people in the whole high school. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, my dad was my
teacher. Is little. That's like homeschooling.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. We'd eat tofu and rice and then go into the, the other area where the high school was.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
And so how old were you at that age? You were in ninth grade?
Yeah, 14, I think, right? From ninth grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then your high school experience was just, being in that small atmosphere.
Well,
Kind of sounds like there was, go ahead.
that didn't last long. I ended up going to Florida for the summer, and a series of events. Well, my stepmom ended up leaving my father, and it was just a really rough period. So I ended up staying in Florida for a while, until my father called me back, which was really traumatic because I didn't know why I had to stay there, and I wanted to go back to my father, and I just yeah. So then when I came back, we were in Santa Cruz. So I went to Santa Cruz High, so it was a regular high school after that, and as soon as I graduated, I went back to Canada. I was really homesick. So I went back to Toronto, and yeah.
And what was that? What was your after high school experience like?
Well, my sister and I, her name was Rilka in the book. Our plan was always, because I grew up doing ballet, and my sister and I would go to theater camp and dance camp in the summer when I would visit her. Our plan was always to go to LA as soon as we could. That ever since we were little kids, right? Become the dream. And because she was 3 years younger, I had 3 years to kind of play with. And I did. And without going so much into all the detail, not to make it tedious, I ended up going back to school, or that was my plan, which I did. I got into a theater school in Miami. And my best girlfriend was filming a show in Chicago. So I stayed with her, and I earned money. I had the summer to earn money for college. And I got a job at comparable to the 24-hour fitness. So standing there at 5 a.m. with the
towels,
with the towel. Yeah, I think I lasted 3 hours. Let's just say that I lasted 3 hours.
Yeah.
In my, and then I handed in the spandex blue uniform, and I went home. Went to the condo that my friend was being put up at when she was filming, and I opened Chicago Tribune, and I went right to the back of the classifieds, and it said make 3, or I don't know how much money an hour. And the next night I was on the subway going to meet Mr. Sam at a Italian restaurant, and the following night I was at his apartment with 6 other girls sitting on the couch, like a velour couch with a zebra, velour zebra above, framed, and eating, bologna sandwiches, waiting for a guy to call to, if we fit the description, or if I fit the description. And so at 19, I became a call girl for a period.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I was.
What was that like? What do you think? When you saw the ad, did you understand what you were getting into, or were you just you did? You were I want to make
2
money.
months or 3 months.
Okay. I'm always curious, how that happens, especially to somebody it could happen to anybody really, but people that have that trauma in their background, there's always something there, and it could be money that motivated you. It could be so many different things. And obviously you weren't a bad person. I hate when people are judgmental of hearing these kinds of things, because it's you never know what somebody's story was, why they looked at that ad and they went, okay. So you found yourself sitting on that sofa with this man, and then what happened?
And the other girls. Well, I went out and saw my first client, and I did try to cocktail waitress, and I didn't have it in me, but I did have it in me to, in some respects, because I really believe I do think trauma informs those decisions. Certainly not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And also, needing to make the quick money. And I'm also very clear that not everybody chooses that who has to make money and doesn't have those resources.
Mm-hmm.
I was not a good call girl, a prostitute. I was terrible at it. I remember my first client was this man, and he wanted me to talk dirty, and I was just like, I just froze, and I just couldn't. And I don't know, it was like 2 a.m. and he said, "Oh, this is the best time that they, at my donut place. Let's go for donuts instead." So, we went for cinnamon rolls and had hot cinnamon rolls, and he gave me money, and that was my first night. And I thought, well, maybe I'll be able to learn to talk dirty, right? But I give that snapshot too, because it's like the men were all types. Who
Mm-hmm.
no one would think, oh, you go for donuts, like what, the guy's going to pay for sex, but you end up for donuts and you still make the money. I did learn to be a better call girl. That didn't last too long, because I wasn't in Chicago. That was a few months, and then I went to school for theater in Miami. However, by the time my sister graduated and I moved to Los Angeles, I remember taking the cab, and she was working at the Body Shop, a strip club up on Sunset Boulevard. And
I know where that is.
yeah, still there.
If you're an Angelino, everybody knows where that
Yeah.
is. Especially, I lived in West Hollywood for years. Yeah.
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 Yeah. In fact, I want to post a little excerpt from the book with that picture, yeah, just so people can see the visual of
It's
it.
in every movie. Yeah, it's in every movie. Like, it's very, very common that they'll do like a street shot of the Body Shop. Yeah, every celebrity goes in there. Yeah, for sure. I've actually even been in there.
She's like, yeah, that's where I asked out Brad Pitt. I'm like, you did? And
yeah, no, they're all in there. They were all in there. Like, when I was young, I remember I went one time with a group of guys, and I was like, okay, time for me to go now. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So she ended up coming out, and you were in theater school. You guys were both in LA. She ended up at the Body Shop. And then what about you? What were you doing?
Well, I had no money. I was like, I needed a car, right? Well, first I needed to even learn how to drive, but I needed a car, needed, rent money. And I, thought about joining my sister there, but I was very shy and I just couldn't imagine dancing. I just thought, well, that's, she was a much better dancer than she was, it was burlesque at that time anyway. And I just didn't see myself doing that. I just felt too, couldn't get up on stage. However, I did end up doing, ended up being a call girl again with this madame, and did that for a period of time. Yeah. So I
was it Heidi Fleiss?
No,
it wasn't.
No, but
Heidi
it was
Fleiss.
During that time. So yeah.
It was during that time. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. But every single thing you've said to me, and I by no means am a therapist, but I tried to, every guest that I interview, no matter what your story is, that's why the podcast I talk about being resilient. It's I can tell from your story that you're just a fighter, and you were just trying to go on and do everything you could.
Yeah.
And so when people might listen to your story or might make judgments, I hate it when people do, because it's like nobody understands what it's like to stand in those shoes with that past.
Yeah.
Just tapping on your shoulder all the time, whispering in your ear, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the ways of checking out and not being there for the experience, the disassociation that happens, all of that trauma that yeah. And yeah, I did end up stripping though. I came to a point where I just couldn't do the call girl. I say call girl, you know, and it's a nice. I find it a nicer word than prostitute. I still have trouble saying prostitute. Uh, but I ended up doing going to strip to be with my sister, and that was a step up, right?
Were you still at the same location? Like at Body Shop or
We
a
went
different one?
to a little dumpy place on the east side near the railroad tracks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then we ended up at a
Oh,
better
okay.
club, better, uh, prettier girls, more money, you know, more competition, and did end up back at the Body Shop at one point. Yeah, yeah. So bounced
Wow.
around. I mean, probably every
And
strip club.
tell me about like the life, the understanding, like what it's like, the mentality of having to like perform in like, obviously being, you don't like the word prostitute.
I mean, you can say that. It's good. I mean, it's yeah.
No, or like whatever you prefer, but like it just makes me sad that you found yourself in these situations, but all of it makes sense when you kind of like take a step back to me.
Yeah.
And does it make you sometimes look back on your life, before I go into like the questions that I'm sure every human on the earth goes, well, what is it like working in a strip club? You know, all of those things. But I like to talk about like what it was like knowing that you were just trying to like get through it and make that money and exist, if
Yeah.
you will. Obviously your sister had some issues too, and that's her story, but people don't usually just go into like, you know, becoming call girls or going into stripping without some background of usually you know, some kind of molestation as a child or trauma,
Yeah.
period. I'm sure you must know some, but it's very rare, right? That a lot of those women in the clubs,
Very rare.
they come from a pretty hard background, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I do want to say, because I remember doing this panel in Chicago a few months ago, and it was on the sex trade. And one of the audience members in the Q&A said, well, you were driven by your drug addiction to make those choices, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, no, like these choices were not like I was not a drug addict at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's important, because a lot of people think, oh, it's, you know, these choices are made to feed the drug addiction, which is certainly true at some, you know, in some for some people. But I also think, you know, especially being in recovery now, people are like, well, you know, we make those choices when we're under the influence. I'm like, no, I wasn't under influence.
But do you think that a lot of times, if women or men or whoever it be go into these professions, they don't start out with the intention of ever touching a drug, right? But
Yeah.
then it's like that's just like something that they end up doing to get through,
Yeah.
because you are putting yourself out there, and we're human beings. And I've been in those places. I mean, you know, people are ogling at you. You have a bunch of gross, perverted men, like, you know, like throwing money at you. Like it's got to be difficult, and you can't always want to be in the mood to obviously do that. So tell me about that part of it.
Absolutely. I remember when I first started stripping too, I thought, wow, it's such a stereotype that all the girls are on drugs. And I really was like, just, and however, that was where I began doing drugs uh, to
Mm-hmm.
to lose weight. That was my sister and I wanted to lose weight. We felt we were curvier than some of the other girls. And we're like, how do they do it? And we would try all these
Mm-hmm.
diets. Like we had we went to Weight Watchers and strapped on weights to our ankles to, be able to qualify, because I guess we were under the weight, but like for a stripper, it, I don't know, we were delusional is what we were. We still say that today. We're like, we look at pictures, and like she ended up getting a part in Showgirls, and we were watching that recently, and we're like, oh my God, like that was pre-lipo. We ended up getting liposuction. And she was 21. I was.
Well, that's so common. That's so common, though, in LA. I mean, the LA is like, and Las
Yeah.
Vegas, right, are two of the capitals of like the high end strip clubs, and then obviously low end, but very common all over the valley. That's, people know all about it. But I do understand that, because in my 20s, even though I was not a stripper, nor would anybody want to see me do that, especially these days, because I would be in my Hanes for her briefs and my like old lady bra. But that's a joke. Sorry. But I was so hard on myself in my 20s, and I have two little girls, and like my almost 13-year-old this week, she'll be 13 this week. She's just like I was. And my joke all the time, and my listeners have heard me say this, is I'm like, if I could just go backwards with the knowledge and the brain that I have now, and the confidence that I have as a human, to what I looked like at that age, and just put those together.
Oh, yeah.
But we're also, as women, just so hard on ourselves. And then just, I can imagine, like, I was acting always on diets. I understand that. And if you were living in LA during that time, very common to be doing drugs. So that's not the clubs, all that scene. That's what people did, right?
Yeah. 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 And, so the strip clubbing, at first it was fun because I was with my sister. So we would go to work together.
Mm-hmm.
We would put the bleach trays in our mouth on the way and spit in the yogurt cup. Like, we just like we were hell on wheels, the two of us. We were terrors. No one would want to be around us together. Like, we'd roller skate in our apartment at 3 a.m. and it was hardwood floors. We were on the top floor and we were horrible. Like, we were just.
Where did you live? I need to know, like, what part of town.
Right, a block from House of Pies.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I lived in Los Feliz like at one point too. I wonder if I knew you.
Well, if you did, you wouldn't want to be hanging out with us.
I know. I'm like, well, I was maybe not roller skating, but still. So you were in the beginning like happy to be together, and then it kind of turned.
Well, it turned in the sense of my sister was a good dancer. She was good at stripping. She didn't have the same emotional reaction as I did. I became one of those. Well, one, I wasn't dancing on stage. I don't know if there's any strippers that don't dance on stage, but I had talked with the owner. I'm like, I can't do a stage. I only want to do private dances and lap dances. I didn't want to be up there, except for like something that's called Ladies' Choice, and you have to get up there and walk around in a line with all the other girls so the men can see you. And then you give like a free dance for 30 seconds and say, would you like more? It's always so humiliating. They're like, no, I want Celeste now. I'm like, okay. I was Claudia. My name was Claudia.
Yeah.
And Claudia and Lola, my sister was Lola. So it was like, oh my God, if Claudia and Lola don't do well, it's a bad night. Like, because then most strippers, when they first begin, it's like I don't know. I shouldn't speak to most strippers. I don't know what their experience is. However, I became more and more depressed. And we, at one point we tried crystal meth because we asked this girl, Athena. It was after our liposuction, and we started forming these muffin tops because we got it in our I guess our hip area or in under our butt, because we thought under our butt was just horrifying. We were like, we can't live with the way our underbutts look. There's no line. Like, we can't go on like this. And we talked to Athena, and we're like, what do you do? Like, what do you guys do? What to keep your figures. And I look back on pictures and I'm like, wow, we didn't like our figures. It's kind of crazy, you know?
Yeah.
Just
No,
like what
no,
you were
I
saying.
know.
And she said,
Yeah.
crystal meth. And we're like, crystal meth? And so we tried it and we did it for a month. And that planted the seed. I immediately loved it. However, we didn't lose weight for a whole month, which is
Hmm.
unheard of. And like, you don't do meth for a month and not lose weight. But that is what happened to us. And fortunately, because then we stopped.
Oh, you were able to stop after a
Yeah.
month?
Yeah. However,
Wow.
at the time, then there was this diet drug called fen-phen, which is just pretty much legalized. Do you remember
Yeah.
fen-phen?
I've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did it when I was young. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's awful. It's horrific. Yeah. Really bad for you too.
Yeah. So I was like a fen-phen junkie. We both were. Like, we just, and I went to a bunch of different doctors, making sure I get it. Like, that was my gateway after the first meth. It was the fen-phen. And I became skinnier and skinnier and would sit on the side and cry and cry. And nobody wants, there's one section of the book. It's like, nobody wants a crying stripper, right? But at least I had a couple
Mm-hmm.
regulars. I guess they didn't seem to care too much. And then it just got worse and worse, got worse and worse. And
Well, fen is also like a major depressant. So it makes sense why you were struggling. I know many people of our age group that tried that diet drug and ended up having bad health problems. Thankfully, I was not on it for a long period of time, but I remember struggling with my mental health from taking it. It was really bad. I would have really bad panic attacks.
Yeah.
So that is why I went off of it. I can remember that. And I was young. I was in my 20s.
The panic
Yeah.
attacks. I started having those too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was actually in a man's car. The first one, my sister and I were trying to get out of stripping, and we started doing like catering. And we were going to Disney World? Yeah, Disney World, to do an event. It was like 4 a.m. We had to drive there. We were carpooling with this man, and we're on the freeway going to Anaheim.
Was it Disney?
Disneyland.
Oh, Disneyland. Okay,
Yes,
I was just confused.
Disneyland.
Disneyland. Yeah. So you started doing, like, you got out of the stripping and then you started going into catering? Tried to.
Yeah,
okay.
Tried to. I was doing like extra work and so was my sister. We were both trying we were trying to get out of that. And so, and we wanted to be together. We thought, well, catering, we can be together and go to these catering events together.
Yeah.
So the first one we were doing was, like I said, in Disneyland. And we were carpooling with this guy. We're on the freeway. It was, like I said, 4 a.m. because we had to be there really early. And I started having my first panic attack. I did have my first panic attack on the freeway. And I started shaking and not being able to breathe and the sweat. And I thought I was dying, as many people, if anyone's experienced that.
Yeah.
And my sister took one look at me and she told the guy, who we didn't even know, pull over. And he let us out on the freeway and kept on going. That combined with like the fen-phen of the panic attacks, I shared that memory. It's actually not even in the book, that memory. That it was interesting that it was in the car of a stranger, because that was when I was 6, right? So it was like something triggered in me. And at that point I was 24. And, things got really, really bad after that, really bad. And my solution ended up being crystal meth. That was my solution, which it took me a lot of years in recovery to realize that the word solution. I didn't understand, how could that possibly be a solution? But it was my escape, or my attempt at an escape, because I couldn't tolerate what was coming up.
This all makes sense. Every single piece of what you've said today, even though I can't relate to the stripping part or, you know, some of the other parts, but I can relate to a lot of what you said. And when you have an addictive personality, which is really just trying to cover up that piece that you're trying to run away from so hard, so hard.
Yeah.
My trauma, I lean way too much. Thankfully, I did take a really long break from alcohol. I'm back, not drinking to the extent like I did, but I drink again and now I'm taking a break again. But I lean on alcohol. I'm very open about it. I think in the past like couple of years, I've realized, and I took that break because I was like, here I am doling out advice every week, talking about my mental health, and yet I was drinking a bottle of wine every night.
Right.
So we all have, as trauma survivors, coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
Some people just tend to like wrong place at the wrong time. And it sounds like a lot of that is kind of what happened to you, you know?
Yeah.
So tell me, once you got back into that meth world, how long were you like, did it take for you to like kind of, for the sake of time, I feel that I could talk to you for hours. Like how long did it take you to kind of get out of it, or
it was a long run. I had
next?
a long run. It was 7 or 8 years.
Wow.
And by the time I was towards my end, I was probably about 36, 37, and I hadn't been a drinker at all. And when I quit meth, I began drinking, and that really scared me because I saw that I was just substituting one thing for the other. And it scared me so much because before that, I couldn't even finish a glass of wine. And shortly after the meth, I saw, oh my God, wow. I started controlling and managing it and trying to not drink, after, or trying not to wait until 5 o'clock, trying to wait until 12. Don't do it before the gym, do it after the gym. All of the ways that I tried to control it.
How did you kick meth? Like, because that's a really heavy duty drug to kick. How did you kick it?
I mean, my memory of it, because it was now for meth, that was 15 years ago.
Okay.
And although like now that I'm like completely sober, it's 12 and a half. So there was a few years of the drinking. So, completely clean and sober for 12 and a half. However, with meth, I remember the end and the kicking. My experience of it was it's not like, I've never done heroin, so I don't know, but it's not like that withdrawal. It was, I slept and I ate. I feel like I hadn't slept eaten in 8 years, right? However, the depression was so gripping, and the anxiety. And again,
what about like all the things like losing your teeth or the things that they talk about, the side effects? Did you?
Yeah, I started looking really bad. I mean, my family's like, "What is going on?" And I just said, "Oh, I'm just eating a lot of sugar." And they're like, "Well, you're so skinny." But my pallor was weird, and my teeth. I had always had like, nice teeth, and they started deteriorating. I started losing the enamel. Fortunately, to this day, like I have my teeth, which I don't even know how that happened. I did get these like little bondings in there, although I'm still self-conscious about my teeth. I am like.
Well, your teeth look great. You look fantastic. And by the way, 12 and a half years. That's congratulations on your sobriety of 12 and a half years. That's quite an accomplishment. So let me ask you, what made you, where are you now? Let me ask you that.
Yeah.
And if I'm skipping ahead of anything, you tell me. But I want to know where you are now and like how you decided to write the book and
Yeah.
and like kind of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, where I am right now is, the book came out about 4 months ago, 4 or 5 months ago, in
Mhm.
September. And now I, where I am right now, I mean, I'll share with, like, actually today. Today, I woke up and I just was like this depression. Like, I just felt so sad and like tearing up before, like, just so sad. I thought, oh, wow, like, here it is. And to be transparent, I'm grieving now. My father, who was my everything, my greatest fear was when he would pass. And that
Mhm.
happened 5 months before the book came out last year. And so, I share this because my greatest fear, and then also my dream of having the book come out, came around at, it was like the death and the birth, right?
Yeah.
And it's coming up on a year next month, a month tomorrow, or a month yesterday, that my dad will be the anniversary. So I'm in a really raw place today. With the book, how I started writing the book was, I had never wanted to be a writer, but I was always writing. And I started writing a book after I was writing some articles for The Fix, which was a recovery magazine. Uh,
Mhm.
and for those of you who know Amy Dresner in the recovery world, uh, I was writing, well, yeah, I met her at the gym and she was a columnist at The Fix. And I was like, I never heard, I want to, like, nobody writes about sugar daddies in and out of sobriety. I want to hear that. And she's like, yeah. So I sent her the article like that night. And she's like, yeah, anyway, so I started writing essays, and I had been publishing short stories like in obscure literary magazines. Um,
Mhm.
and for quite a number of years, and I never wanted to write a book. But I met a mentor, Jill Sherry Robinson, a very successful author who's in her 80s now. She became my mentor, and I was in a writing workshop that she was doing, and she said, "You're writing a memoir," and I'm like, "No, I'm not. Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to write a book. I'm a short story writer. I'm an essayist." And and then we began working together, and I began writing. It was a very, very long process for me. uh, the the writing of it took probably about five years, and then the whole thing with the publishing and everything, and going through a couple agents and choosing how the publishing, that took all in total 10 years. So it's been a
Oh
long
wow.
journey. Long
Yeah.
journey.
Can I just say one thing to you about what you said? I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I hope I don't make you cry.
No, you.
Um, I think you're pretty fantastic. Um, and your story is. I can tell there's many layers that we didn't even uncover. But the fact that you talk about your book coming out and kind of like finding that dream, but at the same time like losing your dad.
Yeah.
I've gone through a lot of grief in my life, and so I kind of like, I'm never going to say I'm an expert, but what I can tell you is I don't know if you're spiritual, but I am. and
Definitely.
and
Yeah.
and my I lost my own dad when I was 13, and I think that these things are the worst part about loss, is especially somebody that you love so much, is that we just don't see them. They're gone, like they're not here to us. But what I really believe, and I say this often, is they really are here, but they're just in the next room. So there's a famous poem about just being in the next room, and we just can't see them, but they're really, really here.
Yeah.
And what I want you to know is like you writing your book and you sharing your story and you know, getting sober and you admitting like, you know what, today's not a good day. That's all part of the cycle of life. And you're going to have your good days and your bad days. But like what you're putting out there into the world is like going after a dream, and your dream came to fruition, and you're here still for a reason. And then, you know, he's proud of you. I don't even know your dad, but I just had to tell you that because I just felt like I had to say that. So
Thank you for that, Megan.
I don't know.
No, I'm definitely spiritual as well. And everything you just shared, I'm in line with. I believe that wholeheartedly too. And in fact, I have my little altar that I prayed at. I mean, before meeting with you, and that.
Do you have a, like, I ask a lot of my guests what their signs are if they've gone through loss. Do you have a sign that your dad's with you? Like, do you have something like where you're like, oh, I know he must be here because I like, you know, a lot of people will say hummingbirds. My sign is the butterfly.
Well, as soon as I got back to LA after he passed, I had to get a hummingbird feeder. So I have hummingbird feeders.
Do you see them?
Yeah, they come. They are.
And did the hummingbirds come? Yeah, I have one too, and they come all the time. And mine fell down, and then I felt so guilty because I'm like, oh no, my hummingbird's gonna die. But he or she kind of like to think it's a he because he's one of my angels. Stands on that line, and I just watch him in the morning with my coffee. Same. Yeah, they're with us. They're with us. And for me, I literally could talk to you for hours and hours. I just feel like there's so much to uncover in your story, and I'm just so grateful that we connected.
Me too, Megan.
Where can everybody follow you? What's your Instagram and best ways to reach you?
Let's see. Well, Instagram is Hannah Sward. Hannah Sward author at Hannah Sward author.
Yeah. And then your book is available.
It's available.
Let's plug your book.
I mean, the easiest is Amazon, right? I do support I like to support independent bookstores. So it's also easy to order it through, go into your bookstore and ask them to order it, but also just for easy's sake, on, bookshop.org or, certain bookstores I've gone in, like yesterday I went into some bookstores to sign different books, but I don't know what bookstores carry it on the shelf. They all have it on their online, but
does Barnes and Noble have it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
the
easiest would be barnesandnobles.com or amazon.com or
Okay, everyone, go out and get the book. And I'm just so honored to have you on and have met you, and I just want you to know you made my whole day today meeting you.
You too, Megan. You too. I felt so raw, and I feel, filled my spirit this morning.
Well, keep going, everybody. Everybody, I'd like to say that, and as a reminder, like we talked about in the beginning, you know, we have peaks and valleys in this life. You know, you're gonna have your good days and your bad days, and like we just talked about, you know, you can have the greatest things in the world happening, and then like you could just take a dip. It's all about like understanding that you matter, and like we're here for such a short time. I say a lot, I'm like, a decade seems like I blink my eyes and it's a decade later. Like I cannot believe I almost have a 13-year-old. I feel like I just was at Cedars and I was just delivering her and she's almost 13. And that's terrifying. But I want to always remind everybody of that if you listen. And you can follow me and send me your questions and whatever you want to ask me. You can follow me at Judging Meghan on Instagram is the best way to reach me. And I'm on Patreon now, and you can see me on YouTube. You can watch this episode on YouTube. And just a reminder, be happy by making other people happy. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Megan, so much.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.